Thursday. I am very excited about the day, the week, my life. So welcome to Learning Unwrapped, a talk show about your most important life skill. And we are brought here by International Broadcast Media TV. We are very grateful to have this show. And actually, one of my guests today played a role in getting me to this show. So we're going to talk more about that too. But first, let's get to it because executive function is such a key skill in our lives that I want to get the conversation rolling. I'm going to bring in my co-host, who is an instructional strategy specialist working here with me at IDE. She prior to being here, she's taught in a lot of places. I think she's a California girl. I will find a little bit more about that. Let me bring her in and then we'll talk. Please welcome Holly Hunt.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me.
Where have you taught?
I have taught in South Africa, Brooklyn, most recently Trenton, but I did start my teaching career and I am from California.
Woot, woot. And I should say that, you've done a lot of interesting things here working at IDE. You're in charge of our virtual learning communities, which are our courses that we run. And you have designed in the field of executive function. You are teaching in special ed too. And so as you were designing curricula when we hit the remote days of the pandemic for a special education school where you were providing activity lists and ways in which kids would be able to engage remotely. So that's going to add to the fun to the conversation. But perhaps you are best known for any of you out there who watch the show weekly, and I hope that's everybody in the world. But at the very end of the show, there is always this delightful young man who thanks us for watching and tells us to tune in next week. And Holly is his stepmom and his co-director because she is involved in helping to film that every week. So thanks, Holly.
Thank you. Yeah, he's such a little special piece of my heart, and he loves doing it for you, Nancy. So
and I love him. So he's a great co-anchor. So we've got three really cool guests to bring in here. The first is a woman that I met years ago, and actually she is a kindergarten teacher in the Chester W. Taylor Elementary School in Pasco County, Florida. And you guys will hear me talk about that from show to show here and there, because the principal at first reached out to us and said that she wanted to be the first LADIC school, Learner Active Technology Infused Classroom, which is my framework, school in the state of Florida, because our work actually began in New York and New Jersey. And sure enough, if she's got every teacher in her school is trained running learner active classrooms, it's a fabulous school. And the first group of teachers we worked with are kindergarten teachers. We worked with kindergarten and fourth grade. And the kindergarten teachers have done an amazing job of taking kids in an area where there is a lot of economically disadvantaged kids and really bringing them in and building executive function quickly. As a matter of fact, it is this group of kindergarten teachers who, by my looking at their work and thinking, how are the kids advancing so quickly with this framework that I developed, that it got me to do research and write the book on executive function. So that was pretty cool. So the teacher that we are going to have on the show today, she actually spent a good amount of time doing what I think is perhaps one of life's most important careers, which was being a mom. And she worked as a stay-at-home mom, and then she came back into teaching at Chester Taylor School. And she also, she's been studying ways to build executive function in students. I know we had some time we were talking about how do you build executive function through play, et cetera. So let's get her in here. Please welcome Carmen Garrison.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey.
So Carmen, before we go any further, I want to have a show with all of the kindergarten teachers from Chester Taylor on here. So we can play around with how you really transform kindergarten. But for this show, I only had room to put one. So I brought you in because I know that you are also the kindergarten facilitator. You work a lot with all of the teachers and interns, et cetera. But you have to give a shout out to that amazing group of colleagues of yours.
Yes. So I want to give a shout out to Eileen, Dawn, Keisha, and Kristen, but I also cannot forget my amazing administrators, Julie Marks and Kim Hedgebeth, that kind of, they let this all happen for us at Chester Taylor.
Shout out to Chester Taylor. We love you guys. And actually, if y'all out there in the audience, if you go to our YouTube channel, which at some point Carrie, our director, will throw up across the screen. There it is, right there. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can find under playlists that there is a playlist of Chester Taylor as they went through beginning LATIC, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, everything that they went through.
So Carmen, tell us, what's something that you've learned this week?
So right now, our county, Paso County Schools, is we are up for an adoption for a reading series. So this week, I've been learning about new reading series and how they're going to correlate with our new standards. And really just kind of working with my team and seeing like how is that kind of going to go with what we're doing in our LATIC classrooms and things like that. So we're doing a lot of experimenting. So, and that's kind of what I've been working on a lot this week with my team.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, finding a good alignment between LATIC and a literature series. Well,
right, and being able to do all of those things well, I know we'll talk about the play-based learning, building executive function and things like that. Like, so how is that going to work? How are we going to take that and make it our own, like we always do here at our school?
Right, because you guys are getting some real results, and that's what counts. Like, what do you do that gets kids growing executive function in that part of the brain?
Right, absolutely.
All right, so let's bring in our second guest so we can get a conversation going here. Chris Leonard is a clinical social worker and educator by trade. He's done a lot of things. He's owned and operated 2 leading New Jersey therapeutic day schools, the Sage Day School, and that's where I met him, and New Alliance Academy. And he is now the Chief Learning Officer at Thrive Alliance Group, a behavioral health organization dedicated to cultivating the school climate and culture that promotes student mental health and wellness. Please welcome Chris Leonard.
Hi, everybody. So happy to be here. This is awesome.
Great to have you.
Chris, good to see you. What is something you've learned this week?
Well, as a psychotherapist, I've often talked to people about self-talk and negative self-talk and positive self-talk and how powerful it was. And I came across a nifty article that it was published in the Wall Street Journal on January 5th. It's called How to Stop the Negative Chatter in Your Head. And a fun fact from that article is that when we're thinking to ourselves, which we pretty much do all day long, we think at the rate of 4,000 words per minute. Wow. The average State of the Union address is 6,000 words in about an hour. So when you think about the self-talk that we engage in, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, 4,000 words a minute packs a punch. So all the more reason to be careful about how we talk to ourselves.
Right. That's powerful. That's powerful. Well, thanks. And I was just chatting backstage that Chris had actually interviewed me to be on his podcast a while ago. And as a result, Sri Srinivasan, who has a show, asked him to be on it. Chris asked me to be on it. We were on that together. And then Mark Lee, who's with IBM TV, he asked me to be on his show. And then before you know it, I have my own show. So thank you, Chris, for getting
my pleasure, Nancy.
Because I really think this is my gig. I love doing talk shows. So here we go. I'm hoping to take over, on one of the late nights. Somebody's got to retire soon, right?
Absolutely. I can see that happening.
Exactly. All right. Our last guest is currently the Senior Director of District Engagement at City Year. She was the Director of School Improvement with the Council of Chief State Officers. She served as a district leader, implementing programs to increase teacher and principal capacity. She served as a school leader, leading school-wide transformation efforts that narrowed achievement gaps in literacy, mathematics, and science, and increased family and community engagement by focusing on equity and advocacy. And please welcome Rosalind Rice Harris. Woo, woo.
Rosalind.
Hi, Nancy.
Hey.
Hi.
Tell us something you've learned this week.
Oh, wow. So we've had a really wild week. So I have learned a lot, but thinking about our conversation today, I learned a lot about the work that Boston Public Schools has been doing around executive functioning and integrating those strategies throughout the whole school curricula, and the impact that it's having on teacher preparation, professional development, as well as student outcomes. So really excited to learn more about that program, as well as how the work that we do at City Year integrates with the executive functioning work that the district is doing by supporting our students with our whole school, whole child approach. So learning about those connections and being able to articulate those has been my new learning this week.
That's cool. And our live audience has been learning as well. I really liked what Corey Uri put up there. If you can bring that back up. Right? Amanda Gourmet. Yeah. What do you think?
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Amazing. I sat there and I'm like, the poem, the way she presented it, the phrasing, the intonation, the way she used her hands. Let me just say, that woman has executive function. I want to say to the live audience too, I love that we have a live audience because I love seeing your comments. Please feel free to comment. Please feel free to ask questions. Just know that at the point you type and hit the enter or the return key, it takes another 30 to 60 seconds before we actually see it. So if you are going to say something like good point, say who made the point, because otherwise we get good point about a minute later and we don't know whose point it was. So just keep in mind, we may not get your comment at the time you type it in. So, and we do want our live audience to engage with us and to ask questions. We have Boyd, one of our directors backstage, who will capture those questions and be able to put them in when we have some opportunities. So let's get right to it. I wrote a book on executive function, as we talked about, that was actually, this book was fueled by the kindergarten teachers at the Chester Taylor School in Pasco County because they implemented my framework across the kindergarten classrooms. And I think there were maybe 5 classrooms at the time, 4 or 5. And the kids, I always tell the story as, so these children are coming in and some of them don't know their letters or their numbers, and some of them don't know their names, and some of them don't know how to hold a pencil. And within 2 weeks, these kids are walking around with iPads and like, oh, I need to learn how to use a glue stick. So I'm going to scan the QR code and watch the video. And it's kind of like, I remember in the first year, even, I guess Apple Computer visited and said, like, how long have you been doing this? And the teachers were like, 15 days. And I got thinking, how are they showing such gains in 15 days? That got me focused on executive function, and boom, there we go. And so most people, when they look at executive function, look at them through what I'm going to call the traditional categories of like working memory. So we have a list of executive function skills and cognitive flexibility. And if you just take a look at some of those, like some of these, you can't function in a day without some of these skills. And some of these skills are skills we still don't have into adulthood. But this is the typical way of looking at it. And the problem with that is that if you focus on, well, now we're going to learn cognitive flexibility, it doesn't fit into anything. So what I did is I really started to look at them in terms of how do these skills address just life, levels of engagement in life. So I created these levels in terms of if you took all those executive function skills and mapped them, there are those that you need for just conscious control. I need to be able to focus. I need to be able to, manage not hitting the kid who walks next to me. But then I need to be able to engage with content. Then I need to be able to collaborate with others, engage with others, be empowered, efficacious, and ultimately all of them contribute to being in a leadership capacity. And by leadership, I don't mean that you have to be, the head of a company or the head of a state or anything like that. We, our kids are leading one another in their classrooms. We lead one another in our families and groups. And so that's kind of the way that I frame executive function. So I'm just like throwing that out there to say, let's talk about it. And Carmen, I'm going to put you on the spot first to say, talk about what it is that you guys accomplished with the kindergarten kids.
Well, I believe before we started with the Laddie structures, we were just noticing that we wanted kids to do all of these things. But
now wait, I'm going to assume that's somebody's phone, right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that goes to okay. Just Put it out there, because otherwise we're hearing you as like,
I
okay, start that one again.
But I believe we just had to make that shift. So we had to focus on building executive function because we wanted them to do all of these things. We wanted them to be able to scan with an iPad, and, you know what I mean, and to do all of these tasks. But we weren't focusing on like building the executive function to be able to complete these tasks. So we were getting frustrated with them because they couldn't do a lot of these things before. So basically we just wanted to incorporate like deliberate activities to build executive function in our students so that, you know, we can get, you know, like you talk about those levels, like we're trying to build that in our students, but we have to like deliberately plan for those things. Like you just can't, you know, expect, you know, children that come from poverty to come into a classroom and be able to do a lot of these things.
Right.
So,
and the beautiful thing about executive function is, you know, the part of the brain that's right behind your forehead handles a lot of it. And that part of the brain, I mean, I hate to use, I'll probably go over to Chris because he's, you know, he'll tell me this is not the right term, but that part of your brain can grow. And the idea is that part of the brain develops. That's a better word. That part of the brain can develop, and it actually develops a lot in our life. So we can, I mean, the beautiful thing is that if you have a student who doesn't focus well or can't follow steps or anything like that, just know that you can develop that part of the brain and actually have them becoming more and more successful. And so, Chris, maybe you could talk about some of the things. Either you can go the route of how can you help children become more successful with executive function, or you could go and talk about executive dysfunction. I'm just going to throw the ball in your court, and you just tell us something.
Well, let's start with the frontal lobe, because what we know about the frontal lobe is it takes a while to develop. You know, we say that it's kind of fully developed. Obviously, it with neuroplasticity, it continues to develop throughout the life cycle, but it takes a while for it to become fully functional. And we now know that it takes till between about age 23 and 25 for that to happen.
Right.
And then when you throw in stressors like poverty or trauma or anxiety or depression or COVID, all of those things, you know, any kind of stressor like that, anything that gets that cortisol level up, that creates impairment in the frontal lobe. And when you have impairment in the frontal lobe, then you have impairment in executive functioning. So that's definitely, you know, hugely important.
And I want to come back to the COVID topic because I have thoughts. But Rosalind, I want to get you in here. Like your background, like what is it that you're doing with City Year or in any area on the levels of executive function?
So the work that we do at City Year, it's loosely based on executive function, but we definitely focus on supporting our whole school, whole child framework, or we call it the WSWIC framework, in which we provide a holistic approach to academic supports, social emotional supports. We provide near peer relationships to our students in order to support them to be successful in school. So with that, we're supporting them with attendance, with work completion, as well as providing them with a sense of belonging and connection within the school that, as we all know, supports them in then developing an affinity and self-efficacy in order to be successful in school. So our goal is to ensure that our students are not just graduating from high school, but are successful beyond, as well as our core members who are supporting this work to develop as positive contributors to society and leaders within the school and community. So with that, we're working on many of these different skills, supporting our students with organization, supporting our students with engagement, supporting our students with work completion, all of these things in order to grow if we're looking at the science of learning, these different pieces of their brain in order to then give them these attachments to be successful in school.
Yeah. And I know that, for instance, social and emotional learning is a big goal for schools. One of the challenges I think that I find in schools is they tend to segregate and create these silos of we're going to work on differentiation. We're going to work on SEL. We're going to work on, you know, spreading things apart. But fundamentally, you can't do any of it without executive function. Like you can't get to social and emotional learning without executive function. So it's so hugely important. What kind of advice might you give to teachers, any of you who have students who are a little older and not exhibiting the executive function skills that they would want?
Well, here, I mean, one of the things I thought about today was I see a lot of 20-somethings in my practice. You know, some people who are having trouble starting college, some people who've gotten out of college and now they're completely at a loss. And they have a lot of trouble. You know, I was looking at your list of executive function skills. They have a lot of trouble initiating tasks, persisting in a task. They're basically overall kind of missing the soft skills. The great thing about being 20 is you got your whole life ahead of you and you feel like you can do whatever you want. That's the bad thing about being 20 is that, oh my gosh, I've got all these choices and I don't want to make the wrong one. So for teachers, it's a matter of understanding where people are always, right? You have to start with where your students are and understanding that those are some of the things that 20-somethings are coping with.
Right.
I think as well, as educators, we're creating the conditions for our students to be successful. And I think if we're looking at education and looking at how do we create this high quality, engaging, and equitable environment for our kids, that piece of executive functioning is crucial. So in supporting teachers in identifying where they see those disconnects for their students, as well as examining their pedagogical practices, their teaching practices to figure out, so how can I pinpoint what's missing for my kids? So if it's organization, how can I pinpoint that? And what are some ways so I can teach that using the strategies that I use every day? How can I teach that explicitly and then use the classroom to support the development of that strategy? Mm-hmm. If I'm supporting my kids with self-regulation, how can I incorporate these strategies in my classroom? Is it breathing in breaks? Is it journaling? What are these strategies that I can weave in my day-to-day practice to ensure that my kids are not just practicing this in the classroom, but they're also learning these life skills as well? And it has to be done in a way with job embedded professional development so that it doesn't seem like it's another thing. Like I'm not doing differentiation like in this bubble, or I'm not compartmentalizing. Our teachers need support, guidance, and examples on how to do this in their day-to-day. And also to point out that they are doing this daily. So how can we make sure you're catching it in the moment and you can name it? And then when you're able to name it, you can then break it apart and instruct upon it.
I love that you brought up the conditions and the name it. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's so powerful, Rosalind. You know, being able to name the science, know the why behind it, and say if you have, and Chris can help me with the exact brain science, but if you have a middle schooler, you know, or an adolescent they're not developing those executive function skills at the same rate. They're kind of leveling out right then. And so being able to look at them and say, I know you're not thinking with that reasoning part of your brain that we're talking about. You know, maybe you wouldn't say that to the 13-year-old, but you would know it, and you would understand there's a bigger picture. And to both of your points, where now can I meet them where they're at? So there's power in the language and the science as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a question that came up for you, Rosalind, that said, do you also provide supports to parents?
So we're working on developing supports for parents in increasing their engagement in school, providing them with the language and access, because I think I think what also needs to be named is that many of the structures in our traditional education system were not built for our students who we are calling underserved.
Right.
So with that, we have to retool and redesign what these entry points look like for our families of color, for our families in poverty, for our English language learners, so they can access this current system while we're working to retool the entire system so that it's inclusive and equitable. So with that, yes, so we are starting that work to ensure that our parents are able to figure out what that school culture is, so
Right.
they can enter it in a way that makes sense and supports their kids.
And Carmen, I'm going to head back to you, because in one way you're dependent on parents, because, you know, children are born, and at the point that they're born, they really start building executive function. And you see it, for any of you who have encountered an infant, very young child, that in the beginning they can't even focus. Then they start focusing on objects, you know, then they start playing with things. Then they can handle a single task, so a command. So if you say, like, well, you know, hand me the red ball, they can do that. But the student who is just learning to say, hand me the red ball, can't follow, hand me the red ball, then the blue, and then the green. Like, nope.
Yeah.
That's more advanced executive function. So depending on what parents do at home, reading to their students, asking them questions, engaging in conversations, etc., they'll be building executive function. But when you get your students in kindergarten, they're coming from all different backgrounds. And you guys are kind of like the first line of defense to build executive function. What kinds of supports, advice, information do you give parents, or how do you engage parents in being a partner in this?
Well, I think first of all, it's we have to understand, like, where they're coming in developmentally, like what is their developmental age when they come in.
It's like Rosalind's point of, where's the entry point?
Right. Where are we starting? So a lot of it is just, you know, with our parents, just like making, you know, being that they come from poverty, we don't want to like make them, you know, feel badly about, you know what I mean, some of the things that maybe they kind of have to deal with, and maybe that's why their child is struggling, you know, with executive function. But you know what I mean, just giving them those, you know, talking to them about reading with their child, like you said, like multi-step directions, speaking in complete sentences, things like that. You know, making sure that they do have their, you know, having social interaction outside of school with other children, things like that, because sometimes we see that they don't have any social interaction until they come to kindergarten. Some of our children, I don't believe, have really ever left their house.
Right.
So that, you know,
that background, that gives you frame of reference for further.
Right. Well, and kind of seeing like what is their, you know, maybe what is their trauma? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are we, you know what I mean? What can we do to help? And like kind of understanding. I think a lot of it just is, for us, is like understanding where they're coming from. You know what I mean? Where are they developmentally, and what can we do for them from there?
Right. I think, you know, I'm a big fan of gaming. And when I was a kid, my parents were into board games, and we would be playing board games all the time. And my dad taught me how to play chess. And as I was studying executive function, I realized that the game of chess teaches you like almost every executive function skill. And just, I think because my dad did it, when I started teaching, I taught 4th grade in my first year, and I had chessboards in the class. And the deal was for my students, and I used activity lists, and the deal was like, find some time in there to play chess, like get another partner, and you got to put in like a half an hour a day playing chess. And it was funny because the other night I was watching I don't know if it was an interview documentary like show on Kamala Harris, who, let me just pause to say, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, our first female and Black and South Indian vice president. Woot, woot. So, but I was watching, and I noticed that she said when she was young, she was taught chess, and you know, chess was very important in her family, and she was taught how to play chess. And I'm like, and that's why she's vice president, because she's got all that executive function going on.
Well, even like puzzles and coloring sheets, like some of those things that we don't think about, Nancy, like those are also very important things. You know what I mean? Like, and just like playing tag on the playground, you know what I mean? Like, are important things that they need to be doing. You know what I mean? That we don't think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we think about parents as well in the conversations we're having with our kids, you know, if they tell us something that happened, even just taking a step further and saying, well, what do you think caused that? Or how do you think the other person felt? Because both of those questions are building executive function skills, whether or not we realize it.
Mm-hmm. And I wrote about this in the book. I was in a kind of an outdoor eating area years ago, and you'd go inside, you get your food, you come out, you find a place to sit. And this father is coming out, and the son is with him. And the son must have been about, I wanted to peg him at about 3. And he said to him, "Where shall we sit?" And the boy walked over to a table that had keys on it. And so the father, instead of saying like, "No, somebody's sitting there, let's sit over here," the father said, "Well, we can't sit at that table. Do you know why?" And the boy looked at the table, and then he said, "Oh, there's keys on it." And he said, "Right, so somebody's sitting here. Where else do you think we could sit?" And then the boy looked around and he found another place, and he goes, "Okay, let's go sit there." I went up to the father and I said, "I just have to thank you for taking that amount of time to walk your son through the thought process, because you are building executive function." And when we just say to kids, "Here it is, do this." I know Felicia, who is our director of consulting services, when her daughter was 18 months, she would say to her, like, "Do you want the Cheerios or do you want the yogurt?" And her husband was like, she's 18 months old. Well, you know, how can you ask her that? And Felicia's like, "I'm building executive function." Like, and it's true. It does.
Yes, Nancy, totally. Like the conversation and elevating that voice and choice for kids. If you don't have any other material resources, if you're able to do that, to talk with them, use words, be able to have them share their thoughts using their language back with you and have them make choices and explain why, will set your kids, you know, leaps around the heads than what we normally think around, because they're thinking about their thinking. That metacognition is so important.
Right. And even having the two-way conversations. So rather than just, you know, shoving a cookie to the kid and saying like, "Eat up," it's like, "Would you like a cookie?" "Yes, you would like a cookie." "Why do you want a cookie?" "Because they taste good." That kind of two-way conversation that the parent's having when the kid probably can't even talk, that is powerful. That starts to build language skills, literacy, and executive function.
I can say that one of the things that a lot of people are missing when they get out of college is that they've spent so much of their childhood having things done for them, having decisions made for them, that they really don't know how to make decisions. They don't know how to, that's why they have trouble self-initiating. And so much of the way in which we traditionally handle difficulties with executive function is we teach kids how to have an executive assistant. We're going to give you a point person, and this point person is going to check your agenda, and they're going to go over your homework with you, and they're going to make sure you have everything in your book bag, and they're going to, so great. Now I know how to have a high-level executive assistant. That doesn't teach me any executive function skills. It teaches me that I need somebody to do this stuff for me.
Right. And I think too, as painful as it is for parents to let their children struggle, it is so important. And struggle not in a bad way, but in a way that rather than doing it for them, prompting them and saying, "Well, what could you do here? Well, what else would you do?" And I know I was reading recently about it. Used to be that, well, Chris, when I was a kid, I often say, like, I don't remember my parents seeing me all that much. I mean, we did a lot of stuff together, but I don't know that everybody was like right on me. As a matter of fact, when you came home from school, you went outside, you got on your beautiful brown Stingray banana seat bike. Well, that was me. And you went riding, and you came home when the bats came out. Like that was the deal. You know, when the sun went down, the street lamps came on and the bats came out, you got to go home. But for hours, we would invent play. We would create scenarios. And then unfortunately, because of our world shifting and it not being such a safe place out there now, everything is scripted for kids. So, and parents are, you know, shuffling them from, you know, okay, we're leaving school and now you're going to go to this practice and here's your cleats and here's your snack and here's your this and that. And it's like that level of, you know, for a while, they talked about helicopter moms and moms, Nothing against you. But if you're constantly hovering over to make sure everything's okay, that's preventing your child from building executive function to the level that they could. And now we're even talking about bulldozer moms. Terrible word, terrible phrase, but essentially
snowplow, lawnmower.
Okay, lawnmower is a good one. But parents who are trying to clear the way for their kids, but again, that's not helping them. They won't know how to mow the lawn themselves. Like, that's not helping them. So how do you tell parents that it's okay to let your child kind of, go to school one day without their saxophone and just deal with it?
I think you frame it as, one of the things that parents are generally concerned about is preparing their kids for success and wanting their kids to be ready for life in the real world. That's what everybody worries about that. Mm-hmm. And if you can frame it that this is how we get ready for the world, that if you were to try to figure out how to get your saxophone to school and you didn't remember it, and you suffered the consequences of not bringing your saxophone to school, that's okay. Mm-hmm. You're probably not going to forget your saxophone as easily the next time. And maybe it starts a conversation. So how do you think you might remember your saxophone? What might you do? One of the things that you can do, everybody's always complaining about the kids on their phones. One of the things you can have a child do is you could take a picture of them, what they look like when they're ready for school. And, they could have the saxophone in the hand, and they could have their book bag with them, and they could have their jacket on, and they could have, whatever it is that they need to be ready for school. And you can even use an app called Skitch to kind of label the photo of what ready for school looks like. And now they have their photo that they can work with. And now they're independently saying, do I have everything? Yes, I look ready for school. Now I'm good to go. And now it's not you. Did you bring your saxophone? Do you have your lunch?
Yeah, we shouldn't take the place of executive function.
Right. So phones can get in the way of executive function for kids, because kids used to write things down, and that's actually a helpful way of a mental rehearsal of what you need to do. Mm-hmm. Punching it into your phone isn't quite the same thing, but having that photo representation of what you might need to bring or what you look like when you're ready to go.
I love that idea.
That helps.
I might have to do that, right before the show started, Carrie was commenting on somebody's earrings, and I'm like, earrings, I forgot my earrings. So, but it's time for me to pause and thank International Broadcast Media TV for having this show, and thank Ankit and Nick and Kim, who are the producers, the big mucky mucks, and also the big mucky muck behind the scene here, who is Gwen Fan, who is our director from IBM TV, as well as our friends, people who work at IDE, Carrie and Boyd, who are behind the scenes making it all happen. And it is time for our segment of What's in Your Mug. So yes, live audience, tell us what's in your mug. We will be putting that up. And you'll notice that the mug I chose today is the brain. And right here, look, I'm going to point on the other side, right over there is your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that handles executive function. And tonight I am drinking back to Gevalia. I don't know. I kind of like Gevalia coffee. Rosalind, what's in your mug?
So I have my very special mug. So this mug was made for me by a good friend of mine, and it's in my sorority colors, pink and green with pearls. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, so Kamala is my soror. And I am not a coffee drinker. I love tea. So right now I actually do have an Earl Grey green tea, and I drink bulletproof tea, so it's very keto friendly. So I add heavy cream and a little bit of butter, and honestly, it really does taste good.
Yum. I know. I've had bulletproof coffee, and it's pretty darn good. All right, Carmen, what's in your mug?
All right, so today I have my mug. It says, "Don't make me use my teacher voice," because this is
like
my
a true kindergarten teacher
all day. So nobody wants a teacher voice when they're in kindergarten. So, and in my cup, I didn't have a lot of time because I just came right to this talk show from a meeting. So I did have my daughter bring me some tea packets, but I didn't put it in there. So I just took the Diet Dr. Pepper that I had in another cup and I threw it in there.
It sounds good. Whatever. You know, if you're having a rough day, just throw in vodka. We'd never notice, you know.
You put it.
You know, y'all think I'm drinking Cavalia coffee, right? Chris, what's in your mug?
Okay, I have my every night is hockey night mug because that is the truth. I'm so happy that hockey is back on. It gives me a sense of normalcy in this time that doesn't feel all that normal all the time. And in the mug right now is green tea. If this were 9 in the morning, it would definitely be coffee, but afternoon it turns into green tea, and I like it.
Awesome. And I saw Christina Volwinkle wrote that she's drinking water again. But, you know, Christina, water is good, right? It hydrates us. So you could drink water every week. Next, we're just going to ask you, what does your mug look like? So we need to know that. Holly, what's in your mug?
Well, California,
Woo-hoo!
girl, of course, I do have my hand-painted mug from the Monterey Peninsula, left to me by my aunt, who is the reason I got into education. And I have mint green tea in my cup, but anytime I have a what would Aunt Pat do moment in my life, which, 2020, I had a few of those, I'll put in an extra cup of coffee, or, Aunt Pat, I'll put in some Chardonnay and whatever I need to feel a little bit closer to her.
What would Aunt Pat put in it?
Exactly.
I love that there's a starfish on there, though, because that's our, our mascot, if you will.
You know what? Everything happens for a reason.
Right? So you got that mug before you took this job.
Long before.
Wow. See, well, making a difference. One mug at a time. One teacher at a time. All right. So I had everybody's mugs, right? We're covered. Let's go on with the conversation. Holly, start us up.
So we've heard lots of great advice for getting started with executive function in your classroom. If you're a teacher, I love the conversation moving towards supporting executive function for your own kids as parents. So my question is, what would the implication be if every student in America was explicitly taught executive function skills from the time they enter kindergarten, if not before, to the day they graduate high school?
I'm all for that. I think that would be amazing. And when you hear about getting ready for the world, and you hear about what students are missing, what everybody talks about are soft skills. Everybody talks about organizational skills. When you get to college, one of the primary measures of whether you're going to be successful is, can you manage your own sleep hygiene? Can you get yourself up in the morning and get yourself to class? Can you get yourself?
What you call sleep hygiene? Getting up in the morning and getting to work? I just want to be clear.
Yeah. Can you, are you going to get yourself up? Because that's another thing we do for kids. I talk to a lot of parents of juniors in high school who are still, nothing. And the kid will say, nothing wakes me up. And the parent will say, yeah, I'm in his room 5 times, throwing water on him, and he still won't get up. Mm-hmm. So I think that to be able to teach kids to make decisions, to manage themselves, to manage their time, to have that constant thread of that, just as we have a constant thread in mathematics and in English and language arts and in every other subject, we have these threads that run up through our curriculum. To have an executive function thread that was age appropriate and continually developed, I would applaud that.
And I would love to have womb to tomb instruction. So I would like to know that at the moment that a person is pregnant, that we could start working with them to build executive function. Mm-hmm. Carmen, what are you thinking?
I guess just from a personal level, I have a daughter that's going to be a collegiate athlete. And one of the things in speaking to her college coach is, like Chris said, was time management, organizational skills, things like that. And I believe that, even what, like kind of what Chris was saying, like those are all really important things that if we're teaching those now, that they will be successful in life. So, but like I said, I agree. It's so important. It would be amazing. And I actually see it too, being like I take a lot of interns at our school, and I feel that would also help them though too, because I'm seeing a lot of like, you know, not having a lot of executive function, or like that executive function hasn't been built up in them, you know, through, you know, their school career. And I feel like that's a piece that is missing with some of like our, you know, our younger, you know, student teachers like coming up.
Right. And Rosalind, your thoughts?
I think it would, if we're able to do that, we would be able to provide more equitable opportunities for education for all of our students. We'd be able to close achievement gaps faster because we're able to build these additional skills to support our students in problem solving, connecting with others and asking for support, managing their learning environment, as well as increasing our responsibility as the adults and the creators of these conditions to make sure that we are changing the environments so that our kids are able to practice these strategies in the midst of their academic learning. So they are very they have a very high emotional IQ that's not lost on their academics. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And I think that with that put together, it would increase achievement for all of our students.
Right. And I think it's important to realize that it's not so much that you teach executive function skills as though they're a subject, because you can't. It's really about using them, putting students in, whoever said it before, creating those conditions. I think, Rosalind, you had said that, the conditions through which they learn executive function. So when you're asking students, and I know, Carmen, in running a learner active classroom, you have students who are using choice boards or schedules that they're making decisions about their learning. Do you want to watch the video, or do you want to read the text, or do you want to go on this website? And they make those decisions. And then that opens the door for you to say, well, I noticed that you pick a lot of videos. Why don't you try doing, you know, something else? And it just kind of goes on and on. Though, like living, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about how does living in a Laddie classroom, like living in that kind of an environment is constantly building executive function because you're being asked to use it a lot.
Right. And I think part of it is just providing like intentional activities and providing opportunities for them in the classroom. You know what I mean? So to develop their social skills, to help motivate them, to help them like understand, like we talked about this like years ago, like what is a choice? Like, what does that mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, so we're kind of like starting, I feel like in kindergarten at our school, we're starting from the very beginning. You know what I mean? So, and like, we're teaching them how to like take initiative, like take ownership in their learning, you know what I mean? So truly taking charge of like what their learning is. But I feel like my job is just to be the facilitator, to provide opportunities for them to be able to do those things. Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And that's what we see, that if, you know, like I say to teachers, if you say to your students, if you need help, just raise your hand. And all the student does is raise their hand all day, ask for help. You don't have to build much executive function. But if you set it up to say, if you get stuck, first you should reread your directions to make sure that you didn't, you know, get something there, miss something along the way. Then you should look at the resource table to see, or the resource area on your computer learning management system to see if there's something there, a how-to sheet, whatever that you need. Then look at the peer expert board. Is there someone else who knows what they're doing that could help you out? Then put your name on the help board for the teacher. Like, you literally give them a set of steps to go through. That builds a lot more executive function than simply teacher. And it's the same thing with handing out paper. If I hand out in a classroom where I can hand out papers, I know COVID has messed that up with it, but handing out papers to kids, as a student, I'm just sitting there waiting for the paper. If I didn't get the paper, it's your fault. You know, I'm just waiting for you to take care of me. If I have to go to a resource area and pick up the paper that I need, or if I have to go online and find the paper that I need in order to do this task, that builds executive function. And even things like, I know in kindergarten, you teach cause and effect, and you teach categorization. I think 10th grade teachers should be talking a lot about cause and effect and categorization. There is nothing wrong with reading a novel and say, let's categorize the type of characters we have in a novel. There's nothing wrong with saying, let's build a chronological timeline. Let's talk about cause and effect in this particular event in history. All of that continues to build executive function. And as Chris said earlier, your brain doesn't fully develop in that area until age 25. So when we talk about, high school kids and, why do they do things? They're like, what were you thinking? It's like, well, quite honestly, they weren't, because this part of the brain wasn't exactly developed to the level that you wanted, All right, now, I can't believe I only have 10 minutes left. I want to get to a question that came up from before. So COVID, what is going to be the impact of COVID? Because I remember several years back, I had fourth grade teachers were saying, oh, this class is kind of really low in executive function, as compared to my last class. And I'm like, really? And then I'm going to another school, and I'm finding the entire fourth grade is really low in executive function, kind of like across the country. So now I start saying, like, wait a second, what was going on when they were born? And I figured out that the children who were being carried in the womb during the 2007-2008 financial collapse, the near depression that we had here, that they would be in fourth grade at this point. And I said, you know what? I bet if you're a mom and you're having a baby and life is good, and then all of a sudden things come to a crashing halt, your partner comes home and says that they lost their job, there was downsizing, all of a sudden you have significant stress. And if you have significant stress, your baby has significant stress. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that had a negative impact on executive function. And I worked with a lot of teachers saying, we need to now build that. So now let's look at, what do you think is happening during COVID that we need to kind of make up for in terms of brain development? I guess we should talk about the impact of COVID, but offer advice to parents and teachers out there, something that they can do. Let's make it a hopeful end to our show. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start. I think we need to look for the opportunity. This is a crisis. It's very stressful. What are the opportunities? And Nancy, you were one of the ones that got me thinking about that in terms of the opportunity that we now have to change instruction.
And I think you have a question up there that I think relates. Take a look at that before you keep going.
Could developing the skills necessary to succeed in remote learning actually help encourage EF development? Yes, exactly. If you do remote learning right, if you're not trying to replicate your classroom in remote learning, right, but if you are giving kids choices, if you are putting the activities out there and giving them an opportunity to choose which path they're going to take, if you're having kids collaborate in breakout groups, if you can look at that list of skills that build toward leadership that you put up at the beginning, and there is the opportunity to do much more that you can do in that 30-child classroom with everybody doing the same thing at the same time. There are many more opportunities in remote learning to do that. Yeah. And if we're smart, we'll probably do some form of hybrid learning moving forward, because there are definitely things that we need to do together that we can do in the same room together that we can do better than any other way. But there are plenty of things plenty of opportunities that this affords us. So now I'll let the teaching experts give you the specifics.
Rosalind, what advice do you have for moving through COVID with grace?
Sharing what Chris shared, I think this is a crucial time for districts, schools, states to focus on executive function as an integral part of the academic curricula, and to support schools and districts in developing professional learning opportunities to support our teachers in naming the things that they already do. And going back to what Chris said as well, this is such an amazing opportunity for us to change how we instruct. Yeah. And I do believe that executive function and effectively integrating that into schools is a key pillar for equity. And I believe if we're able to support our kids in being able to build relationships, to to embrace productive struggle, and to name where they're having issues, and then figuring out those different coping mechanisms in which to support themselves and then to get support. Those are key pieces for our kids to be successful, not just in school, but in life. So what I would say for teachers is to really think about how you are working to instruct your kids now, and to have some grace with yourself, because we changed at the drop of a dime. It was a crazy pivot. And the best thing that many of us did was, well, let me figure out how I can meet these standards and teach the way that I was teaching, even though now it's all remote. So I'm putting all these things on Google and hoping kids get it done. And then I get upset when they don't get it done. Right. Take this opportunity now to talk with your kids. Ask them why. Have these conversations and develop these relationships. This is the time for relationship building, which will grow our kids' EF exponentially.
Yeah, that's great. Carmen, your thoughts?
I agree with Roslyn. That we I guess I feel like we just need to take things slow with them, and we need to be patient, because we are living in a very uncertain time. And I just, and it's a little bit different for me here down in Florida because our schools are open. So some of what we do is we are kind of doing a lot of what we've been doing, but you know what I mean? But it's just like she said, like taking the time, you know what I mean, to build a classroom community, to make sure that we're, you know what I mean, like we're building executive function in our students, but we're not missing like any steps either. So that, making sure that they understand what we're asking of them to, you know what I mean? So.
Right. And I see a question here. What advice would you offer homeschooling parents?
And I wanted to jump on that, Nancy. I saw it from Betta, thinking about these opportunities, right? To think differently. And, homeschooling parents or home-based learning parents right now, no one's saying, oh my gosh, I love all this extra time with my kids. And, we're all getting along so well together. But some opportunities that we do have are to give them some structures and say, at 8:00 every morning, this alarm is going to go off. And then here is a checklist of all the things that you need to do before you log into your computer. Whether it's brush your teeth, get dressed, make your bed, maybe check that all of your assignments are turned in, depending on the age and the level. But I think there's an opportunity for teachers and parents to build executive function in this time.
Yeah, and actually we should put up 2 of our free websites, Carrie, if you could. The fortheparents.idecorp.com actually gives parents lots of ways that they can structure a home-based learning environment in order to support students learning on their own and put students in charge of their own learning. So it's as you can see on the screen, the number 4, fortheparents.idecorp.com. And then we also have For the Kids. The site isn't meant for the kids to go to. It's really meant for teachers and parents to use to pull off graphic organizers that help build executive function. So sometimes I forget how many things we have, how many resources we have available on executive function. And of course the book. Carmen, you have to show your book because I love all your tabs and dog-eared pages. And
it's my favorite book that you wrote, Nancy, because I really
you think that's my best so far?
It just really talks to me and then like the students that we serve here at our school. So.
All right. Well, just, Reinventing the Classroom Experience is coming out. Learning Anywhere, Anytime. That one's coming out in April. And it was just voted to be a part of Book Camp PD, #Book Camp PD, so that we will be discussing that book, obviously later in April or May, because it has to come out first. And so I was thrilled. Thank you to all of you out there who voted for the book to be a part of it, and very excited about that. All right, well, I could go on for another couple of hours with you guys, but I guess I say that every week. Like, the conversations are so fascinating. Thank you for being my guests. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
To get back on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for the audience, for our live audience, thank you so much for all of your comments. When this show is finished, it is available still on this link. It takes about a day or two before the comments end up coming up live, but you would then be able to watch all the comments roll in as they did. So come back to check that out. And then next week, we're going to be gearing up because we are heading into Black History Month. So next week, that is going to be the focus of how do we make Black History Month count. And so obviously, the people who end our show are always the kids of IDE and Holly's stepson, who will be finishing it off. Yes, your heart. And love you guys. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you at home. Change the world. Love you.
Thank you.
Thank
My learning
you.
experience would improve if the work given was important and had purpose.
Do you have any advice for your teacher?
No, she's doing a great job.
First, before we even get to our greeting, I want to make sure that you guys did your morning routine. Make sure that you got dressed, you brushed your teeth, you washed your face, and all of your materials for school are ready to go.
Okay.
I have a folder, and on one side it says complete, and on the other side it says work. This helps me stay organized because then I know what I've done so far and what I still need to do.
Thanks for watching Learning Unwrapped. Tune in next week to talk about making Black History Month count. Now, let me get back to my reading.